Ethical communication. What do you think about whenever you hear those terms? Do you think of truth-telling in the media, liabilities and responsibilities, maybe interpretations of conversations? Well, to approach this topic, we will first discuss truth-telling in the media by outlining honesty, morally offensive content, and stereotypes in the media. Truth and honesty in the media. Lying, deception, and dishonesty are also inescapable in today's society. Truth is essentially everyone's fundamental value. Without the value of truth, we would have no trust, which is a precious commodity. Unfortunately, the media sometimes operates with its own values and within its own world of limited truth-telling. In 1996, the Philadelphia Weekly published a story on the discovered relationship between one of Philadelphia's all-time great baseball players, Jimmy Fox, and starlet Julie Holliday. The Weekly then came out and said that the whole story was a fake, and the editor offered no apologies and claimed that he could potentially fake another story anytime he wanted because he did not break any laws. What does the word lie actually mean? In a sense, everyone lies. However, in another sense, nobody does because no one is aware of the truth. If the truth is unknown, does that make lying okay? It's whatever makes you look good, really. The media is full of misleading information, and it is also a form of lying because it isn't telling the truth either. Lying is really just a subcategory of deception, as is the involvement of communicating false information that the communicator knows or believes is false. The tendency to lie in a story or for a product is sadly just a part of our human nature and societal norms. The truth is always important. We depend on truthful information in order to make rational decisions about different subjects, including what products to buy, what shows to watch on TV, and even the selection of who we want to surround ourselves with. Advertising is a little bit more problematic because of two things. Number one is the linguistic ambiguity in which no product claims are made. All states "you're in good hands" is an example of this. Number two, puffery, which is the use of superlatives, exaggerations, and opinions that do not implicate specific facts like Ford is the best in Texas. The only purpose is to create a favorable image for the product being advertised. As consumers, you should assume some sort of responsibility, and you must be discriminatory and ponder commercial messages with a healthy degree of skepticism. Morally offensive content in the media. Mostly everyone can remember the Super Bowl of 2004 when Justin Timberlake popped off a part of Janet Jackson's corset exposing her right breast. The Federal Communications Commissioner, the FCC, called the stunt classless and deplorable. Both CBS and MTV issued public apologies, however the forces of morality had already been unleashed. The theme following this incident was "What Happened to Family TV?" Indecency at the Super Bowl, pornography in cyberspace, brutal photos in local newspapers, violent depictions of rape and mayhem are all just a few examples of controversial subjects that reflect people's sensitivity to what might be dubbed as morally offensive content in the media. This issue of offensive content is one of the most troublesome ethical dilemmas for media practitioners. Stereotypes in media communications. Stereotyping is a part of the human condition, a mental shortcut that most of us use to bring order to our specific worldviews. We pursue and find common grounds and similarities in stereotyping. It is not surprising to see this technique used often in mass media. An example of this would be back in 1996, the retail store TJ Maxx featured an extremely feminine man throwing a hissy fit on one of their commercials while he was playing the notes F, A, and G on the piano. Here they were classically representing a stereotype gay male. The commercial only ran for a few weeks before it was pulled off the air due to misrepresentation and dishonoring a group or individual. Undoubtedly, the women's movement has succeeded in varying social roles of female characters. Today, advertising of women portray beauty, sex appeal, and youth as their main social role, even though it represents an inaccuracy of some segments of the female population. Next, we're going to look at liabilities and the duty to warn. A liability is defined as the state of being responsible for something, especially by the law. There are three main legal approaches to liabilities that we will discuss: the contract approach, the due care approach, and lastly, the strict liability approach. The contract approach is when the buyer and seller enter into a contract. With that contract comes expressed and implied warranties. An expressed warranty is when a warranty is written into the contract about the performance of the product. An implied warranty is when the seller makes a statement orally about what the product can do. There are four things that define the relationship between the buyer and the seller in the contract approach. Number one, the seller must comply with the terms of the contract. Number 2, the seller must explain the nature of the product. Number 3, the seller must avoid misrepresenting the product. And number 4, the seller must avoid the use and duress of the undue influence. For example, a car salesman appealing to a young driver's insecurities to get them to buy a powerful sports car. The transaction is only fair if the buyer is given an honest description of the product. However, the buyer can claim negligence if the seller violates and express or implied warranties. The do care approach recognizes that the party that writes the contract usually gets the better deal. The manufacturer must take into account the age, literacy, and the ability of their audience to understand the concepts expressed, as well as the descriptive manual and warning labels of the product. The manufacturer, however, is not responsible for injuries that result from the misuse of their product. The strict liability approach is when the buyer's right to a safe product is greater than the manufacturer's negligence in omitting significant details. For example, take the case of Liebeck versus McDonald's restaurants regarding their hot coffee. There is no warning to the customers that the coffee at 180 to 190 degrees can cause third-degree burns in a matter of seconds. She had to prove that the product, in this case of the coffee, was defective because it failed to warn the nature and the extent of the high-temperature risk, leading her to win this case. As a result, McDonald's reevaluated its preparation procedures in effort in creating a safer product. A few recommendations to help the manufacturer or the technical writer effectively communicate the instructions and the warnings on a product are: Number 1, understand the product and the potential users of the product. Number 2, define the product's functions and its limitations. Number 3, write clearly to meet the needs of your audience. Number 4, use simple and clear graphics or pictorials to meet the needs of your audience. Number 5, provide warnings that are large, legible, and in the appropriate locations. Number 6, make sure to follow government as well as company standards. And number 7, keep complete records of efforts used to improve safety. In the most recent census count, about 55 million Americans speak a language other than English. Of those, about 44 speak English less than very well. With that being said, shouldn't it be safe to say that manufacturers should provide their product information in other languages besides English? Yes, but it is not always easy to do that. This is where labels and pictorials come into play. In a U.S. federal appellate court, it was decided that there are 2 essential characteristics that an adequate warning should have. Number 1, it must catch the attention of the reader. Number 2, the average person must be able to adequately understand the information as well as the dangers of the product. If a manufacturer is selling a product in an area where the average user does not speak English or cannot read at all, the manufacturer should consider including a pictorial and a warning message in another language. Common law does not require warnings to be in a foreign language, but some manufacturers are including Spanish and/or French on their labels and instructions as a precautionary measure. The easiest way to present information and warnings is to make sure to include universally accepted pictorials that show the kinds of hazards the product can have. Be conscious of how and where the additional information is positioned. Making the label seem cluttered may render the information to be rather useless. The goal of the manufacturer is to effectively communicate the product information and hazards to the reader no matter the literacy level of the reader. Keeping this issue in mind can help provide products that are safer and easier to use. Finally, moving on to multicultural communication. It is believed that to effectively communicate information to people of a different culture, one as a presenter must fully understand the audience. But how exactly can we do that? Here I will lay out 3 different approaches of ethical relativism to multicultural communication. These include philosophical, universal, and cultural approaches. To start off, what do you consider to be right and wrong? How do you know such actions or events are good or bad? Immanuel Kant is a famous philosopher who came up with the categorical imperative speech that states, "Act only on the maxim whereby you can at the same time will, that is, should become a universal law." This can be translated to doing what's right from the beginning to the very end. On the other hand, John Mill is credited for the utilitarian theory which states the ends justify the means. In other words, the methods are not judged as long as the results are good. A universal ethic does not exist, but there are certain acts that are usually looked down upon. Both philosophies have their advantages as well as their disadvantages. Deciding when to apply either way of thinking varies upon the situation, and it is up to you to use your best judgment. This brings us to the universal law. The universal law, or laws I should say, are universally rejected acts that may include events such as torture, murder of the innocent, stealing, and breaking of promises. David Cale, a respected theorist, proposed a universal code of ethics which states, ethical communicators address people of other cultures with the same respect that they would like to receive themselves. This basically goes right along with the golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated. By displaying mindful respect domestically or internationally, it only benefits the intercultural communication. An example of the universal ethics being abused occurred in World War II. The Nazis believed that they were superior to the Jews and consequently felt the need to extinguish that race. From torture to death, Jews suffered horrible events. This called in several nations into action to put an end to injustice acts. Afterwards, rather than the nation accused of torture and death responding on their choices, they denied that such events ever occurred. This demonstrates how universal rules do exist. Finally, we will discuss cultural ethics. Here, we refer to the fact that different cultures have different values, customs, and practices. The idea is that certain ethical beliefs and values of a culture are correct or perceived as righteous in that culture. This can be extended to certain goods or services are not always acceptable in other cultures. For instance, inequalities between genders and races, even in the workplace, may exist. One way cultural views have affected America is how American car makers never had significant successes in their automotive businesses in Japan. This is due to the fact that the United States had traditionally placed the steering wheel on the left-hand side rather than the right-hand side, as the Japanese are used to. Another case involves how McDonald's offended Islamic customers with disposable paper bags. The paper bags were printed with all the flags of the world. What Americans overlooked was the fact that the Saudi flag contained a verse which, to the Islamic people, insulted their holy book. Communication scholar Stella Tintomi states, a contextual perspective means that the application of ethics can only be understood on a case-by-case basis and a context-by-context basis. This can best be implemented by embracing the golden rule, treating people from other cultures with the same respect and dignity you would like in return. Take the time to understand other cultures and show empathy when describing their values and beliefs. This will only enhance your communication skills to effectively communicate to your audience. Oh my god, if a bee flies in front of my face, I'm gonna freak out. I have blonde hair. There's a spider on your camera. Go away. Yeah, go in the trash can. By the majority, there's bee on you.
Where?
Okay.